Let's unbox the Mandalorian's N-1 Starfighter from the Hot Wheels Starships Select line.
Villa Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it.
Hello there, thanks for visiting Villa Varykino. I absolutely love the sleek and modern Naboo ships from the Phantom Menace, so I was really excited to see the iconic N-1 Starfighter showing up in the Mandalorian live-action series in a modified hot rod version that Din Djarin uses to replace his beloved Razor Crest. With the popularity of the Mandalorian live-action series, it was no surprise to see this new souped-up version appearing in the Hot Wheels Starship Select line before we got the iconic yellow and silver chrome version. This one here is number 17, but I didn't have to wait too much longer because number 26 in the line is the original iconic yellow and silver one. It hasn't arrived here in New Zealand. It is part of that most recent wave starting to show up for a few lucky fans around the world. So while I wait for number 26 to show up locally, I'm going to open up this one and check out all of the details. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, we'll of course get this one out of the box, get it on its display stand, and check out all of those cool details. But first, let's take one last look at the packaging. I really like the consistent packaging that Hot Wheels uses for its Star Wars Starships Select line, so it's a good option if you like to keep them boxed. But for me personally, the lack of a top window means that I do think they look a little bit better out with a little bit more light on them. But the front window wraps around the sides, so we do see them clearly, and I like the position. It kind of looks like it's in flight, and we can see the top details there because this is a little bit of a flatter ship design. Down the front, we have the ship name, the Mandalorian's N-1 Starfighter, and the Hot Wheels logo with that flaming red and yellow design, and Starships Select. We have the iconic Star Wars logo here, and on the top we have a top-down black and white blueprint style image of the starship, the N-1 Starfighter, and we have the faction symbol, which in this case is Din Djarin's Mudhorn signet there. On the top hanger we have the ship name again, N-1 Starfighter, and the number, this is number 17. If this was a variant, this design here would be blue, but this is the standard version. It also doesn't say variant here as well. Now you might notice that this one is pointing towards the left, and you might be thinking, I've seen it pointing the other way. And that is because this one has actually been reissued, and for whatever reason, Hot Wheels decided to package it facing in the opposite direction, which I think was really interesting. The one I have here pointing towards the left is the original release, and if I turn the box around, you can see some of the other ships that were included in that wave. We can see the Mandalorian's N-1 Starfighter, the Razor Crest TIE Fighter, and TIE Interceptor. If I grab a box from the recent wave that included the Gauntlet, we can also see the Mandalorian's N-1 Starfighter there as well. So two different assortments. We can see some of those other ones. I absolutely love the Gauntlet and Sandcrawler, just as an aside. But I thought it was really interesting that they decided to package it facing a different way. I don't know if this is to differentiate it or they just decided to mix things up. It kind of caught me off guard the first time I spotted that. I'm not sure why. I don't know if I have a particular preference, but I just wanted to point that out in case there are any paint differences or any details that were changed between those two releases. This is the original release there. And going back to the back, of course, I like that we've got an image here of the Starfighter mounted on the included display base, because we can't actually see the display base when it is all boxed up here. We can see that we have the ability to rotate the ship 360 degrees, and of course the other ships in this particular wave. It's kind of like a collect them all moment, isn't it? I do actually have all three of these as well. I'm doing my best to try and track down all of the ships from this particular wave because I think they are absolutely fantastic. So enough of the packaging. Let's get this one out and check out all of the details. So now I have the N-1 Starfighter and the box containing the display stand out of the packaging, but I just want to quickly show you the insert that was in behind the vehicle that you can't really see when it's all boxed up. I really do like this black and white blueprint style artwork of the ships included in this particular wave. We can see the Razor Crest, the N-1, TIE Interceptor, and TIE Fighter. This is a fun little piece of artwork that you can cut out and keep if you're opening your box and you don't want to keep the whole thing. So just a little bit of a fun fun memento from inside the box there. But now let's get stuck into the ship itself. It's always fun getting these out of the box because they are metal. There's something about holding metal toys in your hand. They always do feel really sort of fun. A different kind of heft to plastic toys. It is, of course, mostly metal because, probably for safety reasons, the narrow thin parts in this particular toy line are always made out of plastic, and you can kind of tell this one's plastic because this one is just a little bit curved off to one side. It's a little bit minor, but you can see that I can sort of bend these parts here. These ones are actually kind of straight, and I'm surprised that they don't bend more, so I quite like that those are straight. But I think this one was just kind of pushed a little bit to the side by the packaging. They put those clear plastic sort of holding parts really tight around the ships in this particular line. But yes, you can kind of see where the seam lines are. This is, of course, sold in the toy aisle, so I'm not surprised that anything sort of sharp isn't made out of metal. Other ships that don't include sharp points like this are predominantly metal, with the small exception of anything that moves. They generally don't do hinges out of metal. Moving components will be out of plastic as well. But I just love the way that the Hot Wheels line really does work so beautifully for ships with small detail. Absolutely love the way that the weathering really highlights all of the sculpting details. And because of all of the exposed panels of this modified N-1 Starfighter, we just get a fantastic level of detail, all accented with that fabulous weathering. So on things like the TIE Fighters, we've got a very black toned wash. This one's kind of a bit more dusty, I think, which kind of fits with the fact that it was, of course, kind of modified and souped up in Palimoto's hangar on Tatooine. So I kind of like the fact that it's not a black weathering on this ship. Of course, we do have some black accents here on the engines and the cockpit windows, but I really like the weathering here. And I'm generally a fan of the weathering in this Starship Selector line in general. It's a little bit asymmetrical here, just a minimal, but then of course weathering in the real world isn't going to be identical on either side, but overall it feels fairly balanced. It doesn't feel like one person did weathering on this bit and then different, so it always feels cohesive across the entire ship. And of course we've got a little bit of sort of the yellow. I like that kind of nod. We've got the sort of little scraps of yellow sort of accenting here, kind of making me think back to the yellow tone of the original N-1 Starfighter there, of course. Oh, fantastic. So we can see that sort of grayish weathering around those highlight points, around here at the sides, a little bit around sort of the engine, particularly here. I think that is the strongest part in behind where the astromech port was, but it was, of course, now Grogu's little dome. But we do see our 5D4 utilizing this port in a couple of episodes, but we can see that weathering really standing out strong there, and it is not the same on the other side. So I kind of like the fact it's not just symmetrical, because that's not really going to happen. Now, because we have got some plastic here, I do need to point out that the cockpit's windows are not plastic. It's very gloss, but this is actually just painted. This is actually a metal component here, and it is gloss black there. So this is a little bit different for this one, because of course on the original N-1 Starfighters, this was the droid port where we see astromechs like R2-D2 sort of popping out. Because this isn't translucent, it's giving me a bit more of an astromech dome than sort of cockpit port here, where of course Grogu would be inside. I think this is the one time I'm kind of missing a clear plastic component here. It kind of looks like a black astromech rather than that window, which I think is just the one little downside. Generally, I'm a fan of the black cockpit windows. It looks awesome on ships like the TIE Fighter, the Millennium Falcon. You don't need to see inside because of course there are no figures inside, and it's just far too small to really put any sort of discernible detail inside the cockpits. But there's just something about this that just, I keep wanting to call it an astromech, and I know that for this version this is just that clear dome like this part would be. So just that one tiny little detail. It didn't sort of really strike me at first because my brain was reading it like an astromech, and yeah, I think that's just a little bit of a shame. But then of course I like this line for the metal and the detail. If I really want sort of accuracy like the clear plastic windows, there are competitors that do things like that, like the Micro Galaxy Squadron line by Jazzwares. But there's something about the Starship Select line with everything in relative size to each other, not scale. So all the ships are kind of the same size, regardless of whether they are a TIE fighter or a Star Destroyer. It's just fun having these very sort of bite-sized ships all lined up on display. I think that they're really fun, especially with those display stands, which of course we'll put this one on very shortly. I'm just really enjoying all of the detail here. So giving it all a little bit of a wiggle. This little component here just moves a little bit. I don't think it's designed to sort of spin or anything. I think I can just sort of wiggle that on this side. Just a tiny little bit of a wiggle, but not really. I wasn't expecting them to spin, but sometimes I just kind of give everything just a little bit of a test to see if it's going to sort of come apart. But I like the lines of this ship really do well to disguise the seam lines for these pieces. We can sort of see some of them sort of hiding in there, but they do such a good job. This seam line here is a little bit obvious, of course. There's not much they can do in this section here, and of course the seam lines work really well with that black sort of engine paint job there as well. And we can kind of see some of those seams down there. Now, taking a look at the underside, again, we've got some interesting weathering, particularly on this component here. Very interesting. Quite much more heavier weathering on that component than the rest of this underside. This one is a bit cleaner here. We can see some weathering here and on the undersides of the engines. They in particular look a lot grimier than the underside here, but still balanced, and it kind of still looks cohesive in an overall manner. And we can see some of these sort of the metal pins used to kind of help attach everything all together, and we've got a big rivet here in the middle. This is of course where we're going to attach it to its display stand. I like the fact that the silver metallic finish on everything is pretty good at being cohesive between both metal and plastic parts. This has quite a metallic finish to it, despite the fact that it's actually plastic. It's not really standing out to me that it's different to this one, because of course the paint on metal just feels different than the paint on plastic. You can kind of see where we transition between some of those metal parts. I like the weathering, just kind of breaching those two so we can kind of see both just all kind of coming together there with that weathering. Really nice. I really like the weathering on these ships. I haven't really come across one that I dislike in terms of the weathering style. I think that's just part of so many of the ships of Star Wars, excluding the original Naboo ships, of course. They're pristine and clean, and I can't wait to get my hands on that classic N-1. I really want to put it next to this one, but now I have this one and I think it looks really, really cool. Oh, I just love those little touches of yellow and the weathering all over. A little bit of a shame about that curve. It's really minimal. I know there are some tricks that you can do with hot water or just sort of, you know, wiggling it a little bit and seeing if it snaps back after being in that plastic for so long. But honestly, because I'm probably going to be displaying it on its display stand forward and perhaps tipped a little bit to the side, I'm probably not going to really notice that after a small amount of time. So just looking at it all over, there is a tiny little paint chip right at the front on the nose, which kind of fits with the weathering, but I can kind of just feel that when I run my fingernail over it, which is something I don't really spot. The paint jobs on these is usually so good. I haven't really come across an actual scratch or paint chip before. Not that I can recall or that I have noticed. It's so minimal though. It's not ever really going to stand out to me once I put this on display. And of course, it has a worn, sort of beaten up, modified appearance. I can barely notice that. I just caught that and with my eye, just under the lights, the silver was catching my eye. But overall, I think this looks really cool. Because this one ended up being reissued so soon in a subsequent wave after its original release, this particular ship is very easy for us to find here in New Zealand. I don't know how it is for fans in other countries. I do hope if you're able to find this one locally that you'll be able to sort of choose the weathering that you like. I do always like, not that there is a lot of variants, but I do like having a couple of options lined up on the store shelf so I can just go through just just in case there's one that I prefer over the others. Generally, I do find them to be pretty consistent. It just comes down to really minor details. Maybe there's like a tiny little spot here that's just catching your eye in a way that you don't like. But yes, I did have a couple to choose from, but then again, these tiny little things just escape your notice when they're in all of that plastic. Another reason why I like getting them out, because you can just see the detail a lot better. So now it's time to get it on its included display stand. So of course we've got the box showing that there are 2 pieces inside. So let's open it up. We have the top part with the ball-shaped mounting point, and then we're going to have the base plate here, wrapped up in tissue paper to help protect the printed design, which of course we saw on the top of the box. So there was always a metallic silver faction symbol. So for Din Djarin's N-1 Starfighter is it of course his Mudhorn Clan of 2 signet there. I really think that's cool. And it just says N-1 Starfighter. I think it's just too much text to say the Mandalorian's N-1 Starfighter. So I like that we've just got that written there. Like the gauntlet, it doesn't say Bo-Katan's gauntlet, it just says gauntlet on it. And then on that front edge, we have that Star Wars logo stamped there on the left and the Hot Wheels symbol stamped there on the right. So let's get this display stand connected. I like the way that that always clicks in together. It's always so secure. I don't have to worry about this coming apart. So it clicks on fairly securely, just with a bit of wiggling. It doesn't sort of snap into place, which I kind of like. I don't like that kind of the connection points where it feels like you might break something trying to separate them again in the future. This one's fairly secure. I just tend to wiggle it backwards and forwards and we get it there. Okay, so now that looks fantastic. And now, of course, because this display stand has that sort of ball-shaped attachment point, we can pivot it round and really change the angle of display, which is really fun if you've got like a few, say like TIE fighters or X-Wings, you can pose them all sort of differently, or just depending on the angle that you have them on display. Perhaps you've got them at eye line and you kind of want to look more like this. Perhaps they're down low and you can really play around with the different angles. You can spin them all around. It's just, it's fantastic. And it's so secure as well. I never have to worry about these things coming apart. I really dislike display stands where if you go to pick them up, they just all kind of come apart and then you're stuck carrying all your little bits and pieces around to move them and adjust them. I like how secure my collectibles are, and the balance on these is fantastic because I can, for some of these metal ones, you'd think that they would tip forward when you really angle them sharply down that, but I can tip this one all over and it never feels like it's going to tip over. So I love that you can truly display it in whichever angle you really like. And I know it's such a small thing to be so excited about a fairly plain black piece of plastic, but the display stands really do make this line. Something I do really miss about the Micro Galaxy Squadron line is the lack of included display stands in most of their ships. I know there are a few that do come with them, but the fact that these are all pretty much the same, there are a few exceptions. The Slave 1 has a slightly different stand, and of course land-based vehicles like the AT-AT and Sandcrawler have base plates. They are not raised up on this arm like the ones in flight, but there are some ships, like I recently opened up the TIE Interceptor, and of course those angled wings means that if you put them flat on your display shelf, they just tip forward and they look really awkward. I like the ability to mount ships in flight because, as I probably forgot to mention, these ships don't have landing gear. So if you put them on the desk or a shelf, they're just going to sit there in whichever angle the sort of the underside of the ship is shaped like. So because we don't have tiny little landing gear, I really like the fact that we've got them mounted, raised up in a flight, so we can sort of get them in sort of like a dog fighting position or just some sort of cool tipped position. I just think they look absolutely fantastic. I love these display stands and they just look absolutely beautiful when you get all of these ships in a row. Another aspect of why I'm having so much fun finally opening up all of my Hot Wheels Starships select vehicles. They just look beautiful all on display together. Oh, so happy to finally have this one out of the box, and I can't wait to get my hands on that classic yellow and silver N-1 Starfighter from the most recent wave. Fingers crossed it's not going to be too much longer. I've seen some pictures out there and I can't wait to get my hands on it. I might have to buy a couple because certain ships in Star Wars, you can sort of build up a little fleet of them, a squadron. Things like this N-1, they are unique. You're not really going to army build this one, but I want a couple of Naboo Starfighter ships because they're beautiful and I love seeing them all together in their squadron. So can't wait for that one. But oh, I love this one. Tiny little critique about that curve there. That is just unfortunate. And of course, the dome does look a little bit more like a dark side astromech than the dome, but because of the way they construct this out of metal, there wasn't any way to do that clear. And if you're going to do it clear, then there were so many other things, and I can kind of see the flow-on effect. So I don't mind. It kind of goes well with the cockpit window being black here as well. But overall, I think this one's really fun. I like the weathering on it. I like these sort of little yellow touches here. It looks fantastic. Now I'm going to have to open up the Razor Crest and get these two side by side for my display shelf. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Hot Wheels collectible and had a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Hot Wheels Starship Select fan, I've also unboxed the Snowspeeder vehicle. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as our whole Hot Wheels Starship Select playlist. This is the way.